Welcome to the Broken Graciously podcast, where we challenge the culture of brokenness by exchanging beauty for ashes holistically, with candid conversations, transparency, and practical tips. I'm your host, Tanisha B. Lester, lovingly known as Coach T. I'm a Master Certified Life and Business Coach, Certified Christian Coach, Certified Pastoral Counselor, and published author. I look forward to engaging with you in the comments as well as on IG. Follow me on IG at Tanisha B. Lester with the number 1. Please like and subscribe to this podcast. Welcome to another episode of Broken Graciously. This is episode 7. And I want to say happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers from yesterday, whether you have birthed a child or not, or you just stood in the gap for someone else, whether you're an auntie, a godmom, whatever you are, happy Mother's Day to you. For those of you who have lost a child, lost a mother, or are estranged from your mother or your child, I want to say you are on my heart and in my prayers. So let's get into it. So this week, I want to talk about, let's go ahead and talk about mothers and offenses and mother wounds. Let's go ahead and dive into it a little bit. So, this morning my pastor preached a sermon, and his sermon was, it was a Mother's Day sermon, and the sermon was entitled, "She Let Me Go." And it was kind of apropos, and there was a prayer for all of those who wish their mother had been a specific person to them or played a specific role in their lives. So when we think about that, the term for it is actually mother wounds, as I said. We often talk about fathers and their absence and all of those various characteristics or roles they may or may not play. But we don't often talk about mothers and the roles they may or may not play, whether there's some mental issues, some addictions, whatever the case is. I can say that I too thought that my mother should have played a specific role or did certain things, and I wanted her to be a particular person. But there's a hazard in, now I didn't notice at the time, because you just, when you want what you want, you just want what you want, and you don't take into consideration the other person's point of view or what they may be struggling with or whatever they're going through. We don't consider any of that at all. So today I'm going to talk from two perspectives. I'm going to talk from the perspective of a child, and then I'm going to talk from the perspective of a mother. So from the perspective of a child, I wanted those things, right? I wanted her to be a particular way. I wanted her to do certain things, and that wasn't her makeup. And that's not to say that there's anything necessarily wrong with it. I just had my own expectations. But again, there's danger in expectations. Sometimes our expectations of people can be unrealistic, and we're holding on to a thought, a concept of what we may have seen, whether it's with other people or television. Like, we're holding on to that, and we're trying to hold this particular person in to a standard in which is unrealistic for them. Also, it's a standard that we've not communicated. Unrealistic standards and expectations uncommunicated will lead you to a world of hurt. So, I compared her to other people that I may have saw, or, again, just the person I wanted her to be, loving and, all of those things. But as I got older, I came to realize that, that mushy person that I may have wanted, it wasn't her makeup. because that's not what she saw. That's not what was modeled to her. And I think oftentimes we can do one of two things. So as we grow up, we either mimic the behaviors, attitudes that we saw, or we go the total opposite way, right? It's always one extreme or the other. And it's rarely a balance between the two. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. We all have looked around at our surroundings and the people in our lives and said, I'm not going to be like so and so or such and such. And you truly mean it. But one thing I found out was the more you say what you're not going to do, you most often actually do it, whether you intended to do it or not. That's just, kind of how the ball bounces and the cookie crumbles. But I can remember, like just wanting all of those things, or even wishing, like, why was I born into this family, or why did I have to have these parents, right? I, if I'm alone in saying that, but I'm probably figured I'm not. Um, but again, I kind of had to realize that just, that saying I love you all the time or constantly being affectionate, that's not who she was. Because my grandmother wasn't like that. My grandma, well, you go walk up to my grandma and anytime I go to kiss her and she start fighting. Cause she ain't want you kissing her at all. Now she'd kiss all the babies. She didn't care about the babies. But once you got to be a little bigger, you better not put your lips on her. And hugging her was an absolute no-no. She'd cross her arms across her chest and get the kicking at you or swinging at you with her elbows because she ain't want you up on her like that. So learning all of that, it explained why my mom wasn't that way, because that's not what she was modeled. That's not what was modeled for her. It's not like that now. She's evolved like we all evolve. And she's affectionate. If I get up some days and I don't give her a hug and a kiss, did you just walk past me and not give me a hug and a kiss? Like that. That's literally what comes out of her mouth. And some days I do it just because, just to see what she gonna say or what she gonna do. It's not a matter of me not wanting to do it. It's just a matter of, oh, I'm messing with you today, so we gonna see how you react. And so there's been evolution, right? So sometimes, again, it's just not what they know. And in that space, I think it's important for us to give grace to them, and pay attention to your surroundings. Pay attention in a matter of trying to understand where your parent, your mother, has come from, what's been modeled for her, what did she see, what did she experience. And I'm not trying to excuse anyone's behavior, because some behaviors they're forgivable but unacceptable. Um, Again, and we're talking about extremes. And then there was a time in the early 2000s, I didn't talk to my mom for years. We didn't always have a great relationship. And several things transpired at one point or another during that time frame. And we were just estranged. And for me, it was just better that I separate myself for my own sanity, for my own peace. It was just better. Now, would I have handled it that way now? I can't say that I would or I wouldn't. But here's what I will say. What I will say is, even in the separation and even in the hardship of not talking to her for several years, or not knowing where she was or what she was doing or how she was doing, did I miss her? Absolutely. Did I still long for a relationship with my mother? Absolutely. But it wasn't time, I guess. Scripture says everything is in its timing, right? There's a time to reap, a time to sow, a time to mourn, a time to cry, a time to laugh. I don't think it was timed appropriately, because there needed to be some healing on both parts. Now, what I also will say is I later came to find out that there was a lot of interference in our relationship. And again, things transpired that, she was told one thing, I was told something else. And we were kind of kept at bay by what we were being told. So therefore, like that kind of added to the stress and strain of the relationship. But then it came to a point where she reached out, and at that point I was a little more accepting and open. And we had some conversations, and at the beginning the conversations didn't go so well. They were screaming matches on my part. But that's because of me holding on to offenses, and that's a topic that we'll tackle another day. And eventually things started to smooth out, and now, like literally for the last 7 years, we've been in the house together, and there hasn't been any issues. Now, was I scared? Ooh, child. I was terrified because I didn't know at what point things would change or things would go south. But I thank God that they haven't, because one, she's a different person, and two, I am a different person. And I think that's what makes a strained relationship work. When two people can separate and evolve on their own and then come back into a covenant relationship, or a mother-child relationship, things can be better because now you're looking at each other from a different perspective. But you have to have that hard conversation to even understand that the two of you are no longer the same. So I'm thankful for the restoration of that mother daughter relationship. In fact, I would even say this is the best time I've had with my mom, like in all of my life. Like all of my life. We hang out, we crack jokes and giggle, you know. It's always fun in my house. I wish some of the things that go on in here, I wish I could record it. But we're not always dressed, or like I just don't walk around with a camera in my hand. But if I did, whew, some of the things that go on around here would probably go viral. And then vacationing and like whatever. Like in this moment, when I needed my mother the absolute most, she was right there. And she's been there since. Ever since. And at any given moment, I know one thing is for certain. My mom, she got my back. And what she knows for certain is her daughter, I got her back too. And with that, there's nothing that can come against us, because you come for her, you coming for me too. And I'm coming back fighting. So I'm glad for that. And that's my prayer for anyone that has a strained relationship with their mother. Now conversely, from the side as a mother, speaking as a mother, in this very moment, I haven't talked to my child in 3 years, going on 4 years. It's been a while. Does it hurt? Absolutely. Do I miss him? Absolutely. I kind of think on one hand it was probably necessary. My child was a mother. He was a mama's boy. There's nothing I didn't do for him, nothing I wouldn't do for him or my grandson. Now I've been fussed at a lot. He's been called spoiled. Absolutely, my child is spoiled. He's an only child. I mean, like most good mothers, you try to give them what you didn't have and do for them what you wanted done for you as a child. So I tried to do all of those things. I tried to give him the best that I could. I tried to, and balance it with discipline. And then there are a lot of times, and I take full responsibility for spoiling him and overcompensating, because a lot of times I overcompensate for the other parent that wasn't doing some of the things that, you know, I felt like should have been done. But, that's just my opinion. Because I never wanted him to feel like he was all alone and like it was just that's just how I felt. At any rate, so there had come a point where there was a little bit of beef, but I feel like now, this is just my side of the story. I don't have his side of the story because he won't talk. And eventually it'll come to a point where we'll have a sit down, and we'll talk and see one another's perspective openly. And it may not go so well at first, and maybe it will. I don't know. But I do know that the time will come. And I have totally given it to God because there's nothing I can do about it. Now, there were some things that he thought I should have done, and I didn't do it. Now, why I didn't do it? I didn't do it because, number one, I felt disrespected. And I don't work too well with disrespect coming from a child. I don't care how old you are. I don't do too well with that. More so when there is a situation where there was really no reason for the disrespect and there was nothing that I didn't do for my child. Even when I absolutely had nothing, there was always a way made for my son and for my grandson. But again, I had come to a point, given the disrespect, that I needed to make a decision of, am I going to continue to do these things, constantly providing and being disrespected, or am I going to put my foot down and no longer provide? At this point, my child was coming up on his 30s, walking into late 30s, coming into early 30s. I mean, late 20s, coming into early 30s. So it was time to cut some strings and, allow him to be a man and do the things that he should do. And that's not to say that if there was a dire need that I wouldn't step in and help. But I knew at the top of 2020 that some strings needed to be cut. Now, did I communicate that? No. Should I have? Probably. So in that, I'll take responsibility for not communicating my boundaries, because boundaries needed to be set. And as mothers, like, we have a hard time setting boundaries. We absolutely have a hard time setting boundaries. So, I didn't set the boundaries. I didn't communicate. I set the boundaries. Let me change that. I set the boundaries. I didn't communicate the boundaries. And that became a problem. But I was hell bent on sticking to my boundary, whether it was communicated or not. And I'm sure it's been difficult for him. I'm sure at points he's missed me. I'm sure at points he's been angry. There's points I've missed him, and there's points I've been angry with him. Since 2020. And there's plenty of points that I've cried. But here's what I realized. In my times of anger and crying and emotions and praying to God, I knew that maybe it didn't have to happen this way, but I knew that something needed to change. It needed to change for his sake, and it needed to change for my sake, because this would allow him to grow up and step into, like, completely into manhood. I'm not knocking his manhood, and I'm not saying he was less than a man, but it was a point that he needed to mature. That's probably a better way to say it. And then there's also a point I needed to be mature as well, because it was always just him and I. So, I leaned on him for that's kind of a fine line. I don't want to say it that way. I didn't lean on him for comfort. I was just used to my child always being around. Like, we did stuff together. The relationship I had with my mother is the same type of relationship I had with my son, where we went places together, we did things together, we had fun together, we talked about anything. Like, that's the type of relationship we had. But there would always be some sort of conflict that would come into play if he was dealing with someone. And I guess sometimes that's par for the course. That's just how some people function in relationships. I don't know. I just never did that particularly. And I'm not knocking anyone who does. All I'm saying is be cognizant of those that are going to stick around versus those that can go in any moment. A mother is always going to be there, no matter what. Relationships come and go. So just be cognizant of how you treat those type of relationships and dealing with romantic type relationships. So consequently, there was some separation. And at the point of him wanting something from me, I honestly, truly didn't have it to give. But again, and the caveat to that is there was never really an expressed ask. There was never really a question of, can you help me? It was just an assumption because that's what he's always known. He's always known to just say something and I provide. It's never been an ask of, mom, can you? Mom, I need. Mom, will you? It's never been that type of question. It's just always been a statement, and me being the mom I am, I just provide. But again, at the top of 2020, that was like, I'm not doing this anymore. For my own sanity, I can't. And I look at it and I can see the parallels. I can see the parallel of, the time frame that I didn't speak with my mom. I can see it. But that also gives me hope because the same way our relationship broke down with me and my mother, our relationship has been restored. And the same way the relationship with me and my son has been broke down, our relationship will be restored. And I am fully confident in that. I don't know when it's going to happen. I sit in expectation of it happening, and I continue to pray for it to happen. And that'll be another podcast episode, because we'll come on here and we'll talk about it and we'll share, because there'll be someone else that can glean or garner something from it. So I've said all of that to say some practical things. So in practicality, number one, try to give grace to your mother. I won't say father because we're talking about mothers today. Try to give grace for your mother if you're in a position of wanting her to have been someone that she just didn't have the capacity to be. Two, be cognizant of what she may have gone through. Sit down and have a conversation. That may explain to you some reasons as to why she may act the way she acts or shies away from doing some things that you may have felt that she should have done. All things can be resolved with a conversation and some grace. Number three, set boundaries. Set healthy boundaries, not only with your mother, but with your children. That lack of having boundaries for me is what caused that relationship to crumble in some regards. Number four, I will tell you, in setting those boundaries, to be sure that you communicate those boundaries so that it can avoid a potential breakdown. Now, they may not like the boundary that you set, and that's fine. Most people don't like boundaries because they're used to you being on the ready at their disposal. And when you set a boundary for your mental health, your physical health, whatever reason that you're setting the boundary, they don't like boundaries and they will push back. So number five, I will tell you to stand strong in your boundary. And even though they push back, don't you waver, because they will eventually accept it or they won't. And then number six, I will say, no matter what the breakdown is in your relationship, always sit in expectation of restoration. There is absolutely restoration to be had in the breakdown of any parental mother-child relationship. And lastly, I will tell you to turn it over to God. Always keep them in prayer and keep them lifted up. You never know what your prayers are saving them from. What I can say unequivocally is I know that the prayers I've prayed over my child has kept him over the last couple of years. Whether he's communicated some of the things that he's gone through with me or not, he doesn't have to because I know it. The prayers of the righteous will always availeth much. Thanks for tuning in for this episode of Broken Graciously, the podcast. Please like and subscribe. And remember, there's nothing that you and a little prayer and a little grace cannot overcome in the breakdown of a relationship. Talk to you later.